Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory forever.
You know, if you ever get a letter directly from your bishop that's directed just to your particular parish, something's probably wrong, right? Now, if you get 2 letters from your bishop directed to your parish, something's really wrong. Today, the second reading from the epistle was from Paul's second letter to the church in Corinth. But in actuality, he wrote as many as 4 letters to the church in Corinth. So clearly there were some big problems, right? If you get 4 letters, of course only 2 of those letters are extant that we still have today, right? And actually with good cause, I think. Many scholars believe that 2 Corinthians is actually a compilation of other letters. But regardless, if you're getting letters from your bishop, there's a problem. And it seems that if you read in the context of 2 Corinthians, that Paul made a visit to the church in person. Now you're really in trouble, right? So he makes a visit, and apparently that visit doesn't go well. If you read in the context of 2 Corinthians, he has to do things like defend his apostleship, right? And he decries the competing divisions in the church, right? He says, were you baptized into Paul? Were you baptized into Silas? There was this division in the church. And there were false teachers, and there was a significant dose of immorality. And some of these false teachers were criticizing Paul. So put simply, the church in Corinth was a mess. It was a mess. So if you came to the Orthodox Church expecting a wonderful, perfect, peaceful, and strife-free church experience, well, as proof that we are the first century church, you're gonna be disappointed. Sorry, you just are. Of course, the key to surviving that is to remember that you are here working out your salvation, right? And if you get people together who are all working out their salvation together as a community, you're going to butt heads. You're going to butt heads. You're going to step on toes. But all of that is part of you working out your salvation. And a major theme in St. Paul's letter to Corinthians, the second one, is all about reconciliation, unity, and communion. And now I think this leads us right into that familiar story we heard in the gospel today, in which Jesus answers the question about what's the greatest commandment. And I'm sure you all know, you just heard it, but you know well what his answer was. Number 1 is to love God. But then before he gets to number 2, he says something interesting. He says, and the second is like it. Now I suppose the simplest way to envision what that means is that, well, they're both about love, so they're similar, right? But I don't think that's the case, right? I think there's more of a deeper connection between these two than we're given credit for. We'll do well to remember that he also said, on these 2 commandments hang all the law and the prophets. So clearly these 2 are important and more than just being the greatest, right? There's a broader connection. When Jesus says in St. John's Gospel, you may remember this, we didn't read it today, but I'm going to tell you anyway. He tells us that he gives us a new commandment, that we should love one another. Now, that in and of itself is not a new commandment. It's not new. St. John himself says it in his epistle, that there's nothing new about this. Loving your neighbor and loving God is in the law of Moses. It's there. So there's nothing new here. So what was new? What was Jesus talking about? He said it was a new commandment. Well, I think it's found in what he says after that. He says, a new commandment I give unto you, that you love one another, even as I have loved you. Stop and think about that for a minute. Brothers and sisters, Christ's love for us is immeasurable, it's inconceivable, and it's without end. And I'll say it again, it is without end. Doesn't matter who you are, or what you've done, or what you're doing, that love is still there. And we are called to love our neighbors with that exact kind of love. That's the new part. As I have loved you, you also love. With that perfect, inconceivable, and immeasurable love. How is that possible? How can we love with that kind of love? Because this is even different than the love we have for our spouses and our children bigger than that. It's greater than that. It's more perfect than that. Clearly, this is much more than a simple decision that we make, like saying, I'm going to eat Oreos tomorrow, but tomorrow I'm going to stop eating Oreos. That's a decision we make. But to love with perfect love, well, I can give that lip service all day long, but guess what? My kids will tell you, I ain't good at it. Okay? I think something bigger must happen within us. And I think we can find the answer if we just simply remember what I believe to be a rather distinct, orthodox understanding of salvation. For us, salvation is not just a legal declaration. It's not a simple change of our legal status, right? It's not a technicality. You're guilty, but now you're not guilty. For us, salvation involves a real ontological change in us, by which I mean that the very nature of our being is renewed. St. Paul calls it partaking of the divine nature. And what does he write? He says it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. That's a profound change. And to the troubled church in Corinth, he once again relates the story of Moses having to wear a veil over his face. You remember that? Where he saw God and his face was shining. He had to hide it from the people of Israel because they couldn't bear it. St. Paul writes, he says, even to this day, when Moses is read, a veil lies over their hearts. Nevertheless, when one turns to the Lord, the veil is taken away, right? Now the Lord is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. And then he says this, but we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of God, are being transformed into that same image from glory to glory, and as by the Spirit of the Lord. You hear that? We are being transformed. Being. You say that when we come to Christ, there is a veil that's lifted up, right? What do we say when you're christenated and baptized? You say you're newly illumined. The veil has been lifted. Now you are free to really understand what it's all about. And then he says we have a process. It's not instantaneous. It's a process of being transformed. It's that process of being formed into the image of Christ, as St. Paul tells the church in Rome. And in the same letter he says, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. This, of course, is what we understand as theosis, right? It's theosis, salvation. But as I told the Orthodoxy 201 class yesterday, I will repeat it here. When St. Paul talks about renewing the mind, the word mind meant something very different from how we understand it today. When we think of mind, we tend to think brain, that organ in your noggin, right? That biological organ, which typically we understand is kind of functioning like a computer, data in, data out. But ancient peoples did not think of mind as a biological organ per se, but rather as something that is much spiritual as it is physical, and they conceived of it as being more like a sensory organ rather than a computer. You know that inner voice of yours? That inner monologue that we all have? Sometimes it's so subtle because it's such a part of us and we don't even notice that it's happening. But sometimes you'll notice it, right? And then sometimes you might actually have a thought that pops in your head and you're like, where the heck did that come from? Like, what am I thinking? You know? And, we always see that as something that's welling up within ourselves, right? But ancient peoples, they didn't see it that way. They believed that voice, that inner monologue, our voice, right, that we internalize, is not coming from us, but coming from outside of us, right? They would say these thoughts that come into our mind from outside of ourselves, that our brain basically apprehends these concepts and then, feeds on them. We interpret it as coming from us, but the ancient peoples, they didn't. They saw it as coming from outside. They saw it coming from a spiritual realm is what they truly believed. Even Greek philosophers, this was not exclusive to Christians or Jews. Greek philosophers talk about this a lot. But I think when we think about those thoughts, I think it's within that context of those thoughts that are constantly streaming in our brain that we can say that prayer can become a means of stepping away or deflecting those stream of thoughts that bombard us constantly. Because prayer centers the mind, or as the Greeks called it, the nous, right? And this is why the Jesus prayer is singularly so effective in this. It's a single thought upon which we completely focus. And so instead of your mind being lost in a stream of millions of thoughts, you become singularly focused on one thought. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. This becomes ultimately the way in which we aspire to reach pure contemplative prayer, in which our only thoughts are centered on Christ. And prayer in general has a similar effect, and that's why our canned prayers, the prayers in our prayer books, are so important. Extemporaneous prayer can be reliant upon our stream of thoughts. There's nothing inherently wrong with that, right? But I think part of the reason why we have those books is to interrupt that train of thoughts, right? The point of our spiritual disciplines, I think, in part, and prayer in particular, is to gain mastery over that inner monologue. One of the effects of the Jesus prayer and prayer in general is that we reach a point where we're able to effectively discern thoughts that are good from thoughts that are evil. And we reach that point, if St. Paul says, pray without ceasing. You reach that point, I think you're actually able to turn off that pipeline of random thoughts. Regardless of their origin, you see, it doesn't matter. I don't know if the ancients were right about where these thoughts came from, but it doesn't matter. The point is that we gain mastery over them. That's the point. And this is the road to theosis. All these tools that the church gives us, that's the road to theosis, and that's the road to finding and making real that inconceivable love of God in us expressed to everyone. Everyone. The two greatest commandments are like one another because they have a direct symbiotic relationship to one another. The extent to which you love your neighbor is directly reflective of the extent that you love God and to the extent of your being conformed to His image. In Luke's account of this story, someone then goes and asks the question, well, who's my neighbor, Jesus? Who's my neighbor? I always think that guy's like trying to weasel his way out of, right? Because as soon as Jesus says, love your neighbor, he's like, well, surely Jesus doesn't mean that guy's my neighbor, because that guy's a jerk. He's not my neighbor. Or this person I don't like, they're not even Jewish. Surely I'm not supposed to love that guy. And we know how Jesus responds, right? What does he get? He gets the parable of the Good Samaritan. I think a good, maybe sort of self-reflective thing that you may do is to ask, if I asked Jesus that question, who is my neighbor? How would he answer it? What would he tell you in that parable? Who would be the hero in the parable that Jesus tells you when you ask, who is my neighbor? And think critically about it, because you might be surprised. I expect I would. Through recent events, I think it's become clear that the socio-political culture war, which has long had us digging trenches, well, I think it's pretty clear that those trenches are about as deep as they can get. I don't know how much deeper you can go. I'm sure we're at bedrock by now. Where does it end? Does it end? I'll be honest, brothers and sisters, I can't speak much about it because I no longer see Christ in any of that war. I don't see it. I don't see Him. I don't see that love. I don't see forgiveness. I don't see anything like that. The transcendent love that we are called to, brothers and sisters, go and read chapter 6 of Luke. Take the afternoon and just go read it. Look at it, the entirety of Luke chapter 6. I'm going to read a snippet here. This is Jesus talking. He goes on this long, you can even go into Luke 7 too, it continues. We get the Beatitudes, and then he gives us a whole slew of woes. Woe unto you, woe unto you, woe unto you. And he goes on, he gets very specific about the religious leaders of his time. Woe unto you. I just want to read this, so bear with me. I'm just going to give you one of the woes. So we're not so woeful. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets. But I say to you who hear, are you hearing? I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those that hate you, bless those who curse you, and pray for those who spitefully misuse you. To him who strikes you on one cheek, offer also the other. And from him who takes away your cloak, don't withhold your tunic as well. Give to everyone who asks of you. And from him who takes away your goods, do not ask for them back. By the way, Father, can I get my pencil back from you? And from him who takes away your goods, do not ask for them back. And just as you want men to do for you, or to do to you, do to them likewise. And then this. But if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do that. And if you lend to those from whom you expect to receive back, what credit is that to you? For even sinners lend to sinners, expecting to receive as much back. But love your enemies. Do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return. And your reward will be great in heaven. And you will be called sons of the Most High. For He is kind to the unthankful. And He is kind to the evil. Therefore, be merciful, just as your Father also is merciful. These are Christ's words. They're not mine. They sure convict me. I don't know about you, but they convict me. I stand here today convicted because whatever love I can muster, it's nowhere near enough to love my enemies. We cannot attain to this level of holiness and love until we are conformed to the image of Christ. So what do we do about the division, about the anger, the chaos, and the hatred, even now violence? What do we do with that? Simply, we continue doing what we should be doing all along, which is that we seek to be transformed by the renewing of our minds. Pray. For the love of all that's holy, pray. That's how you do that. And so I'll challenge all of you here today, as I did in class yesterday, and I will do for the men who join Men's Fellowship. Keep your prayer rule, however simple it may be. And it should be simple, especially if you're just starting out. But do what you can do to keep it. That's what's important, is that you're doing it regularly. You can say all the prayers in your prayer book. They might be regular for a week or so, but then it's going to be done. So, when you put your prayer rule together and then keep it. Keep it. Instead of doom scrolling and ingesting the latest socio-political outrage, stand each morning away from your phone, away from the anger and the hatred. Center yourself. Stand before your icons. And pray. That is how Christians fight. That's how we fight. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age. And brothers and sisters, we can truly do nothing until we have ended the tyranny of those things in our own heart. We can do nothing. So pray. Pray that you are transformed into the image of Christ and can then comprehend and manifest God's inconceivable love to everyone. Glory to Jesus Christ.